New Tool Day Tuesday, where I share with you guys a unique tool or a tool that I myself use all the time. This one I haven't had a chance to use. It's brand new and it is the adjustable welding table from Harbor Freight. Let's tear into this box and see what's inside. Now the assembly of this unit looks pretty straightforward. There's not a ton of parts and pieces. There is a pretty hefty bag of bolts and nuts and other things. I'm not going to bore you with the assembly, but we are going to get this table together and take a look at its features and functions. And I think today's tool review is going to kind of end on a sour note. And that's because I've tried to put this table together and I've come to the conclusion that the hardware kit they provided me does not work with the table. And let's talk about what we ran into. Now down here on the bottom is 4 screws that hold the legs on. They do pivot so you can store this or hang it on the wall. The screws they provided me, they only go through just a little bit and I can only catch a couple of threads. They're just not long enough. You're supposed to have a washer on each side, which they did provide me, but none of the bolts are long enough and they seem to be a little small for the holes. I think they could have went a size up. They kind of wobble a lot. The hole is really big for these bolts. So it's all I had, so I put them in there and they're only hanging on there by a couple of threads, so they're going to have to be replaced with the appropriate bolts. Now the next thing I ran into was the instructions show a bolt going all the way through here through the support beam. I couldn't make that happen because none of the bolts were long enough. Again, they seem kind of small for the holes, and I was able to kind of, take my finger in here and shorten them up and put a nut there to make it work. So at this point in the game, we still had a functioning table, but we had some minor issues. Now these yellow handles, albeit are pretty nice, they're supposed to have a washer that just so happens to kind of catch these holes here. And in my kit, I don't have any washers that even come remotely close. So the only thing that would hold this table still is just friction on this handle, which again, may be okay, but that is not what the instructions say we should have. And if there was a washer that would lay inside each one of these holes, it would really lock this table in. You're going to be putting a lot of weight on this table because, well, you're welding metal. And I think that's a pretty important feature. Now the next thing I ran into is there is 4 bolts on the top here with screw heads and they hold a bracket on the back side. The holes in the tabletop were not even remotely big enough to accept these bolts, so I had to drill them out. Another feature of this table I would have loved to show off is how these sides work. There's a couple of them. There's one on one side and one on the back, and you can put them on any edge that you'd like. They're designed to tighten up, and you can raise them above the table just a little bit, so if you need to build out a 90 and weld it, you can. If you don't want them, you loosen the thumb screws and drop them below the table edge and they're out of your way. Unfortunately, the thumb screws they gave me are way too big for the hole and the receiving nut that's welded on the back side of the table. They're just not going to work. Speaking of hardware, I followed the instructions to a T, other than not having the right size bolts and pieces and the amount of washers and screws. This is the leftover. There's a ton of extra parts and pieces. It's almost as if I got the wrong hardware pack. I will say that this table was not opened. It was taped shut. So this came from the factory like this. So I'm going to have to end this video without a full tool review of this table. This is the first time this has ever happened to me. And I do have to apologize to you. I will get a hold of Harbor Freight and try to get a replacement table, and hopefully that one goes together without a hitch. But unfortunately, we have to end this video here. If you like these types of videos, please like and subscribe. Take a look at some of my other videos, and at the very least, you might be entertained.